Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance. Imagine your new entitled terrible boss stealing credit for your invention and then having the audacity to fire you for so-called poor performance. Now imagine he has no idea that you actually own the patents to everything he just claimed as his own. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled r/MaliciousCompliance. New boss takes credit for my work and fires me, unaware I own the patents. So I've lurked here for a long time and I never thought I would have a story worth posting. Well, until we hired a new VP of engineering. So quick setup so you can understand the mess. I've been a senior R&D engineer at a tech company for a long time. I'm the quiet type who likes lab work, data, and keeping things running. Office politics make my skin crawl. Years ago, I designed a battery cooling system that became our flagship product. It is not glamorous, it looks like a bunch of channels, pumps, and heat exchangers, but our system solved a bottleneck that other companies could not handle efficiently at volume. In short, it became our main money maker. Last time I checked it, it accounted for most of the company's revenue. Because of how things were when we developed it, I filed the patents in my own name and licensed them to the company. This was all above board. Our old CEO and legal team at the time did it this way because I'd already done a lot of fundamental work before joining and the company could not afford to buy the IP outright back then. The agreement has standard terms, regular royalty payments, and a renewal clause. However, my personal signature is required for these renewals. This is not a trick, it is just how we set it up from the start, and it kept the company's costs manageable, while giving me some protection if leadership ever flipped and tried something stupid. Foreshadowing intensifies. We were stable for years and then the board hired a new VP of engineering. He came from a big name company and talked like a branded water bottle. He was the kind of person who gathered people in a conference room for a so-called stand-up thought shower and said things like, "Our innovation pipeline needs disruptive energy." Without irony, he did not read technical documents, he just skimmed slide titles and acted like he invented gravity. I meanwhile kept my head down. I figured if he stayed out of the lab, I'd be fine. Week number 1 was the warning. He announced that he was reviewing all projects and asked for my technical reports. No problem. I handed over a stack, thermal maps, CFD simulation results, long-term stress data, pump curve analysis, failure modes, environmental test logs, the whole thing. He nodded while flipping pages like he was reviewing a menu. A few days later, I sat in on a leadership update. He gave a presentation to the executives, a very familiar presentation. My charts, my error bars, and my model assumptions in footnotes. Except he had slapped a new cover on it and titled it Assessment of Engineering Capabilities. He then walked through my test procedures and concluded with a line about how we were under-leveraging our core differentiators and needed fresh ideation to capture market white space. I'm not kidding, he said those words and the CEO nodded along. I told myself it was just poor wording. He never used I in that one and I didn't care about credit on a slide deck. By week 3, he started calling the cooling system the breakthrough he inherited in meetings. I tried to clarify once. I said, well, for accuracy, that system came out several of years of modeling and prototyping that I led, so he cut me off with, "We need to focus on future innovation, not get stuck in the past." People made that awkward look where they pretend to take notes. By week 6, he put on a show for the board and said out loud, "When I developed this cooling technology, I was in the back because that is where I always sit. I saw my colleagues shift in their seats. The CEO congratulated him after the meeting. I watched my graphs win someone else's praise and I thought, okay, it's not the end of the world, just keep making the tech better." I told myself it was not worth the fight. By week 8, a major client asked for a custom modification to the system for a higher ambient temp application with a more aggressive duty cycle. This is not a small tweak. The entire heat rejection path has to be tuned, the flow distribution must be balanced across a bigger delta, and the firmware needs changes to avoid thermal oscillation. He assigned it to a new hire out of school who is smart but not experienced with our specific quirks. I offered to walk them through the tricky parts, the non-obvious flow resistance, pump resonance windows, the effect of additive manufacturing tolerances on microchannels, the few places the math lies to you, and he told me, I need fresh perspectives, not people stuck in old thinking patterns. I wrote down my warnings in a short memo and sent it to him, the new hire, and the project manager. It said in boring engineer speak, the client's ask is doable, but will require rebalancing the manifold geometry and adjusting the phase change buffer, the firmware PID gains need returning, and the pump's bearing life will drop if we push that curve, and the production line fixtures are not set up for the new gasket spec. I included the math, the tests I'd run before, and what we would have to do to qualify it. I got no reply. They tried the modification anyway, a month of spin. The client rejected the prototype, it whined at high loads, overheated on the third cycle, and the control loop chased its own tail. The new hire looked exhausted and guilty, and the boss blamed me. His version, I apparently had not properly documented the system, and I was supposedly sabotaging the new team by refusing to help. He called me into a conference room with HR already sitting there like a vase. He started with, "Your attitude has been toxic since I arrived." I tried to say I had sent several memos and offered help, but he said, "Your technology? This is company IP that I've been managing since I got here. You're just a cog in the machine who thinks too highly of themselves." I said if he checked the patents, but he waved his hand. "I don't have time for your ego. You're fired. Clean out your desk today and security will escort you out." HR asked about transition. He said there didn't need to be one because he already understood all the technical details and they would be fine without the dead weight. That was the line. That stuck. I'm not proud that I just sit there. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I've learned that arguing with a person like that in that room just feeds them. I signed what HR put in front of me with the usual, "This is not an admission of wrongdoing" paragraph and left. So here's where the malicious compliance factor comes in, because I didn't have to do anything special. The licensing agreement for my patents renews on a set schedule, but it is not automatic. The company has a right to renew if we both sign. It shows up on a calendar, they get an automated notice, legal reaches out, I sign, and we keep going. The old leadership always treated it like renewing a software subscription. The notice pops up, someone from legal pings me, I review, we sign, and done. It's really been routine for years. At that point there were about 30 days left before the renewal. They had never missed a date and I assumed they'd handle it like they always did, and I assumed legal would contact me, which would have been fine, except my company email was deactivated the day I got fired. I did exactly what I was told. I turned in my laptop, badge and keys. I logged out of everything. I didn't take a single file. I didn't contact any clients. I did not say a word to them other than, "It was nice working with you." I didn't tell anyone about the licensing renewal. I didn't need to. It was already in their system. It wasn't my job anymore. The boss said he understood all the technical details and didn't need me, so I left. Let's go to day one after the firing. I went home, sat on my couch and stared at my hands for a while. I sent a message to my spouse that I'd been let go. We had a long hug and ordered takeout, and I slept like a stone. I updated my resume. I listed my responsibilities at the company in generic terms. I didn't pick fights online or anything. I didn't post about any of it. I called my IP attorney to let him know I was no longer employed there. He's the same guy who worked with us back when we set up the original licensing deal, and he said, "Do you want to proactively inform them about the renewal?" And I said, "No. They will get the notice from their system. They know the terms. If they want to talk like adults, I'm here." Day 7, one of my old coworkers texted me from a personal phone. Basically, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." They said the new VP had sent out an all-hands email about so-called rooting out toxic culture and then told me the client project was on hold pending re-evaluation. I just told them, good luck. Day 15, the automated legal notification hit their inboxes. This part I learned later. The system flagged that the patents needed renewal signatures from both parties. Someone in legal sent a note to my old company email, which bounced. They pinged the VP and asked how to proceed. He said something like, "Just handle it, it's a formality." They tried to route it through DocuSign to my deactivated account. That didn't work, obviously. They asked for a personal contact and he told them to figure it out. Day 20, legal escalated. They dug out the original executed agreement form from the document management system and read the clause that says, "License's personal execution is required for renewal, no implied license." There was also a sentence that says any continued manufacture past expiration without an active license is unauthorized use. This was not a trap, we said, it is just standard in a lot of small company IP deals. Legal probably knew this once, but people turnover and the new VP had not bothered to learn company history. Day 25, they found my personal email via the original contract packet. A very polite legal counsel reached out to me and they said, "We would like to arrange the renewal. Are you available to sign?" I replied, "I'm no longer with the company. I cannot sign on their behalf for corporate documents." They said I was not signing for the company, I was just signing as the licenser. I said, "Understood, but I don't do this without counsel. Please send correspondence to my attorney." I CC'd my attorney's info. Within an hour, I had a second email from a different legal person with that urgent red exclamation point. It said the VP had told them that I was obligated to sign because the company was already manufacturing the product. My attorney replied with 2 sentences and the relevant clause highlighted, "No, I was not obligated. The license ends on the date listed unless both parties execute the renewal, and that is how contracts work." The tone of their next email became very friendly suddenly. Meanwhile, inside the company, the VP kept telling people the legal stuff was just paperwork. He told ops to keep production going, he told sales that we were on track, he told the CEO that recent hiccups were due to legacy engineering inefficiencies. On day 30, the license finally expired. This is not like a light switch though, you don't shut down a car factory overnight, but legally, that is exactly what it is. Without a license, every product that rolls off the line is an infringement. Not only that, but certain clients have reps inside the company who like to see the compliance documents. One of those client reps noticed an internal note saying, "License renewal pending." They flagged it to their legal department and the client paused a purchase order. Then they checked again and saw the license had actually expired. They sent a letter to our sales director. "We cannot accept delivery of products for which you don't have IP rights." That was a 7-figure order. On day 31, my attorney got a call from their legal counsel asking if we could expedite the renewal to avoid disruption. My attorney asked if they were prepared to discuss new terms. The original rate was set back when we were a much smaller operation. It was reasonable then, it was not reasonable now. Given that the product was literally their main source of revenue, their counsel said that they'd prefer to keep existing terms. My attorney said the existing agreement had ended. If they wanted a continuation, they should not have fired the inventor a month before renewal. Day number 32, my phone rang, it was the CEO. I let it go to voicemail and sent it to my attorney. I'm not petty, but I'm not stupid either. The CEO rarely calls me, and when they do, it is because other things have already gone bad. Day 33, their internal fire intensified. Production had to stop on anything that used my system. You would think they could keep the line going and pick it up later, but they could not ship without the license. They tried to rearrange schedules, push other products. Those products were niche though, and cash flow got tight. A few suppliers called to see why purchase orders were being delayed. On day 35, the big client cancelled a $5 million order, not a delay, they cancelled. The client's letter said that they cannot continue business until IP rights are clearly documented and active. Sales panicked and sales told the CEO that clients were spooked. The CEO called an emergency board meeting. Here's what I was told later by someone who was in the room. The CEO opened with, "We are experiencing a serious disruption." The CFO said revenue was gonna miss targets by a lot. The lawyer gave a blunt summary. "We lost the license to our flagship technology because the licensor didn't sign the renewal. Without it, we cannot legally manufacture or sell those products." Everyone turned to the VP. He tried to talk around it. He said there was a culture of legacy knowledge hoarding and he was addressing it. He said the engineer in question had been toxic and he said they were looking at alternative designs and considering in-house innovation to bypass old constraints. He said the patents should be company IP because everything developed at a company belongs to the company. That last part was wrong in our case though. The licensing agreement used phrases like pre-existing IP and inventor retains ownership. Someone on the board, a person with legal background, asked, "Did you fire the person who owns the patents?" And he said something like, "I offboarded a non-collaborative individual." They asked, before or after you reviewed the licensing terms? He said, "It shouldn't matter. The company has been paying royalties for years." The in-house counsel pulled up the clause again. The board member read aloud, "The patents are owned by OP, licensed to the company under a written agreement requiring mutual renewal." Then they asked, "Who approved the internal controls to ensure renewal?" And then they asked, "Why wasn't this flagged as high risk?" The VP said he had inherited this process failure and that he presented all the technology to you himself. That was the wrong sentence to say out loud. The CEO said, "Presented whose work?" The room got quiet. The next part happens fast when a board smells liability. They don't give long speeches, they move in short, cold sentences. They asked the VP to step out. He argued, security was called, he was let go. I don't know exactly what was said. People told me it was something like, "You're done, security will escort you out." Basically the same words he had used on me. I won't deny, I smiled when I heard that. Back to me though. Meanwhile, my attorney and I were sitting there with coffee. We had a list of what we wanted if they wanted the license back. My attorney is calm to the point of spooky. He had helped negotiate the original deal and knew exactly what the market looked like now. We asked for a new royalty rate that was 5 times the original. We asked for an equity stake and we asked for a clause that guaranteed they could not assign the license without my consent. We asked for an update clause requiring my approval for any major deviation from the core cooling method, because the difference between "we altered the gasket" and "we made a new invention" is where companies try to be cute. We asked for a separate consulting retainer if they wanted me to help with the client modifications, and we asked for a title that reflected the reality, meaning CTO, Chief Technology Officer. When we sent over the proposal, I expected pushback or negotiation, but I didn't expect what actually happened. They agreed, not on the first pass. We haggled over percentages and the vesting schedule on the equity, and they tried to write in a "we can reduce royalties if we replace your design" clause. My attorney crossed it out and wrote that any replacement would trigger a mandatory independent technical review to verify non-infringement. We argued about who gets to pick the independent reviewer. They tried to give me a VP of Advanced Projects title without real authority. My attorney laughed and sent back a red line with most of the fluff removed and a simple reporting structure. I would report directly to the CEO on anything involving my IP or related product lines. We added a line that said that they couldn't fire me without cause defined in a specific way, and even then, the license remained contingent on renewals executed by me. That last part is important, by the way. The CEO called me personally and apologized. They didn't try to make it about the VP being a rogue element. They said the truth, they had dropped the ball. They admitted that they should have checked before letting someone blow up the engine room. They told me the board had cleaned house. The VP was gone, HR leadership was being restructured, and they wanted to rebuild trust. I told them I would sign a new deal, but I was not returning to the old dynamic. I would accept the CTO role if it came with real power to prevent stupidity. It took about a week to get everything on paper. During that week, production was still paused on anything using my designs. Sales tried to placate clients. The big clients said they'd reconsider if they saw the new license and if I would personally oversee the modified design. I said yes, but I set expectations. No more cowboy firmware tweaks, no more pretending pump curves don't change at temperature, no more ignoring the manufacturing realities of microchannel widths because a simulation looked pretty. Before all of that could even start, I had to do something that felt frankly therapeutic. On my first day back in the building as CTO, I had to get a new badge. Same security desk, same buzzing gate. A few people's eyes went wide when they saw me. I nodded and headed straight to the lab. My old bench was as I left it, but someone had optimized the text fixture during my absence by zip tying a thermistor to a fitting instead of embedding it properly. I braided it back into the channel and reran a simple test. The results looked like reality again. I showed the new hire what I meant. They looked relieved. Then there was the mandatory all hands where the CEO introduced me in the new role. They made a short speech about learning from mistakes. Without naming names, I spoke for 2 minutes and I said, "We make hard things that work because we respect the details." That's it. No TED Talk cadence, no buzzwords. Just a promise to tell people the truth, even when it's annoying. Clients came back slowly. The big one reinstated their order pending a fresh acceptance test, and we ran it together. They asked hard questions, I gave honest answers. The modified design worked this time because we did the work. We rerouted the manifold, widened a few microchannels that were choking at temperature, changed out a pump variant that didn't like the new load, and retuned the control loop to avoid the overshoot that had caused oscillations. If that sounds like tedious engineering, that's because it is. It's also the difference between a product and a prototype. As for the former VP, the industry is smaller than people think. Word got around that he claimed ownership of a technology on a board call and then lost the company a massive chunk of revenue in a single month. People talk. I didn't call anyone, I didn't need to. Hiring managers at this level ask quiet questions. The answers they got were unkind. I heard a rumor that he tried to spin it as a so-called difficult founder syndrome, but there's a problem with that story when the founder of the tech is the person you fired. The references he expected from our board or CEO were not glowing. I doubt he will land in a similar role anytime soon, at least not with anyone who does a minimal background check. There's another piece people ask me about. Did I sue? No, I didn't need to. The contract did the work. The malicious compliance was me doing exactly what they told me to do. They told me to leave, take nothing, say nothing, and trust that they knew what they were doing, so I did, and they didn't. By the way, the funny part is he could have avoided all of this by reading, just reading, the file that legal maintains on our major IP. There was a literal folder with the original licensing deal, a memo from the old CEO explaining why we did it that way, and a checklist for renewal with dates in bold. But he didn't look. He thought rules were for other people. He thought he could power through on charisma and blame. He thought innovation pipeline meant you could pour ignorance in one end and still get a product out the other. The pipeline clogged. Some people will say I should have warned them when I was fired. I considered it, I really did. Old me would have, but I remembered the words, "We'll be fine without the dead weight." And he made a decision and asked for compliance, and I complied. It was not my job to save them from the consequences of ignoring process and basic respect. If the CEO had called me directly and said, "We're in a mess, can you help?" maybe I would have flagged it earlier, but they didn't. They had a guy who wanted to prove that he could do my job better than me and that he was the author of a story he had not written. If you're a manager reading this, here's your free lesson. Before you swagger into a new place and declare everything yours, read the documents, talk to the people who built the thing you are now standing on. If a person speaks softly and writes memos that look boring, pay attention. The difference between a brag and a business is the signature at the bottom of a license agreement, and try not to fire the person who has the pen. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments if you still enjoy these malicious compliance stories. Also let me know where you are watching from today. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I live in a bustling metropolis in the heart of France. My sister-in-law, Adele, 52, and her indolent husband, Laurent, 54, are perpetually penniless and incessantly grumble about their predicament. For over a decade, they've been approaching family members with heart-wrenching tales, anticipating their debts to be settled. Their familial obligations have already surpassed hundreds of thousands of euros. Adele is a massage therapist, while Laurent, due to his ethnicity and age, believes that he is exempt from job hunting, convinced he wouldn't secure employment regardless. Whenever questioned about their unemployment, Adele invariably responds that she suffers from spinal discomfort and Laurent has ailing knees, is above 50 and of African descent, rendering job prospects non-existent for them. This assertion is utterly false, as I was personally employed at a job placement agency during that period and proposed numerous suitable positions to him, which he declined to apply for, deeming the hourly wage of 18 euros insufficient. Considering this equated to a monthly full-time salary of 2,880 euros before taxes, he found no compelling reason to rise from the sofa. Well then, it is summertime and Adele's birthday is approaching. We gather for a family barbecue. Adele assembles us all and delivers a speech. She expresses her desire to purchase a vehicle and requests 7,000 euros for it, along with an additional 2.5k euros for a high-end electric massage chair. She assures us that the money will be repaid this time. We inquire about her need for a car and how she intends to cover the ongoing expenses such as maintenance, taxes, fuel, etc. and repairs without a stable income. Adele retorts, Laurent is Canadian and he dislikes using public transportation. He is accustomed to driving. Moreover, Laurent requires the car to visit his friends, as commuting by public transport is unbearable for him and he feels uncomfortable. When further pressed about how they plan to finance the vehicle beyond the initial purchase given their lack of money and employment, Adele becomes irritable and begins insulting us. She accuses us of being cruel to her, trying to put her down with our inquiries, implying that she is inferior to us us and reminds us that she had offered to repay the money. The confrontation concludes with Adele bursting into tears and rushing into the house. As I enter the house myself, instead of hearing Adele weeping as anticipated, I overhear her conversing on the phone with Laurent, who was absent from the barbecue. Adele complains to him, claiming that we are all tormenting her, patronizing her, and belittling her. She returns to the garden with a self-satisfied grin, places her phone on speaker, and holds it out to us. Laurent shouts, "Just watch it, I'm gonna mess you all up, you jerks. Talking trash about me behind my back and making my wife cry. I despise you all. You're all terrible, and I'll teach you a lesson." Throughout this outburst, Adele stands there with a contented smile. Sometime later on Adele's birthday, we, the doormats we were back then, decide to fulfill her heart's desire for a car by gifting her a car-sharing package worth 90 euros. Naturally, no good deed goes unpunished, of course. We provide her with the 90 euro deposit which she can utilize. The account is in her name and only she is injured. We thoroughly explain the details to her and she comprehends and agrees to adhere to the contract. She also promises to cover the incurred costs from her account once the 90 euros have been exhausted. Everything appears to be in order. Of course, Adele lied and neglected to update the account info, allowing her deadbeat husband to drive the car. Within a few months, the bill amounted to 1,800 euros. Upon noticing this discrepancy in our account, I promptly revoked access to our account and confronted Adele. She ignores me, refusing to respond to calls, texts, or emails. However, she complains to my husband, her brother, about me portraying me as mean and a nasty wife who begrudges them, the impoverished couple, their car. Adele laments, "I haven't slept for 3 nights because of your wife, dear brother. Demand her money back. It's outrageous." Laurent responds to my email a few weeks later, calling me a B-word and a witch, threatening to beat me up so that I finally shut up and stop nagging him and his wife about the money. He claims that I need help because I've gone crazy. He continues to threaten me, stating that I will soon get a few punches if I don't keep quiet. The situation escalates to the point where this aggressive jerk shows up outside our house, attempting to intercept and intimidate me into silence. Did I mention that this scumbag already has several charges and court cases for violent confrontations? I report him to the police only to face opposition from the rest of the family, who chastise me for messing with him. "Don't provoke the beast," they say. I'm told that I'm responsible for the entire fiasco and that my husband and I have enough money and should let the poor relatives have it. My mother-in-law even goes so far as to say that she would beg from the family so that we greedy people would get our money back and finally stop bothering everyone. Unsurprisingly, Adele and Laurent don't repay a single cent or offer any apologies, nothing. They engage in a full-throttle smear campaign against us. My husband's family rolls their eyes at me whenever I raise the subject, insisting that it's my own fault and that I overreacted with my complaint. They even tell me that my response was extremely over the top and that I am the villain. I face rebuke from the in-laws from every direction. The situation culminates a couple months later at my father-in-law's birthday party, where Adele and Laurent make a scene claiming they are mistreated and bullied within the family and that we would all soon see the consequences of our actions. Again, the infamous threats from my scumbag brother-in-law, Laurent attacks all the men in the family at this event, threatening to hit them and particularly trying to provoke my husband into a fight. My pathetic brother-in-law has no success with this. He is such a coward that he only pushes my other brother-in-law's wife to the floor because he doesn't dare to approach the men. What a loser. Meanwhile, Adele shouts at me, holding me personally responsible for destroying the family and leaving everything in shambles. She mockingly asks if I'm proud of my destructive work. Shortly after, Laurent storms up to me shouting that he would do anything to protect his family and will smash my face in. I call the police as soon as the police siren is heard and Laurent and Adele flee the scene. After 3 long years, we finally received the money back from my mother-in-law, who had condescendingly offered to go begging so that we would stop nagging about the money. She was grumbling, kicking and screaming, but we now have the stolen funds returned by her. She saved her grown-up, unreliable daughter's hide. Recently, my thieving sister-in-law came scratching at our door again, announcing that she had severe depression due to the way we had treated her. I wonder, could it be because of her lousy, lazy husband who is a burden on her and picks fights with everyone he encounters? Apparently there was so much negativity emanating from me personally that she needed to go to a special clinic for treatment of her depression. I told her to get lost and share her sob stories with someone else. My husband also informed her that he no longer had time for her. And well, I can understand that the in-laws found it ridiculous and not worth mentioning that we had been robbed of 1,800 euros. Previously, Adele had stolen a staggering 18,000 euros from her own daughter, her college fund. When the daughter inquired about the money, Adele simply shrugged her shoulders and said, "I had bills to pay." I'm now completely no contact with the in-laws while my husband maintains very limited contact. I'm finally free from those pests. Unfortunately, I must admit that my husband's family, with the exception of him, is utter rubbish. They cover up intra-family thefts, tolerate verbal, physical and emotional violence, and engage in perpetrator-victim reversal. I will never sit at the same table with them again. Update to the story: the saga never ends. My mother-in-law recently passed away. Adele and Laurent attended the funeral even though Laurent had previously expressed his dislike and contempt for my mother-in-law. Despite all the mourners, except Adele, requesting that he not come due to his lack of respect for the deceased person, he strutted into the cemetery chapel with his head held high and sat in the front row, which was reserved for blood relatives. Adele had the audacity to shout at the mourners and relatives who didn't want to see her husband that she was the firstborn of the deceased and therefore had privileges, including the right to bring her husband. She claimed to have the sole authority to decide how the funeral service should be conducted. I believe that deep down, Laurent considers himself to be the French version of a flamboyant pimp. His funeral attire consisted of a dark blue polyester pinstripe suit, not the elegant version but the mobster style, sunglasses, a medium blue fake fur Stetson hat, and a walking stick with a fake silver knob. Cheap and inappropriate pimp style to the fullest extent for a funeral. He probably needed it to stand out since he had been muzzled by the mourners for the occasion. The funeral itself was quiet except for the fact that Laurent did not even approach the grave and just sat there glaring at the mourners, demonstratively turning away from those who approached him and refusing to shake their outstretched hands. Honestly, why did he even bother to come? As the mourning party dispersed, a gathering was planned for the immediate family circle, excluding Laurent and Adele. Unfortunately, my deceased mother-in-law has an older sister who, despite being aware of the plans to invite only the closest family members, took it upon herself to invite all the guests present, whether family or not, in a completely unplanned and unsanctioned manner. Of course, Adele and Laurent felt invited. Free meals, yay! Of course, lacking all decency, sensitivity and manners, Adele and her youngest daughter found it appropriate to berate my husband, Adele's brother, on the spot for not wanting Laurent at his mother's funeral. Mother and daughter were yelling like banshees in the middle of the street just 20 minutes after the funeral. The grave had not even been filled yet, demanding that my husband apologize immediately for disinviting Laurent. Laurent watched this spectacle with relish, enjoying the narcissistic supply he had been missing for so long. Adele and her daughter continued to move towards the location, yelling at my husband, calling him crazy for allowing his wife, me, to file a fake police report against her dear innocent husband and family man. Adele's 18-year-old daughter treated her uncle, my husband, who had just buried his mother, like a piece of garbage. She insulted him, flipped him off and called him crazy and out of his mind. Laurent watched his daughter with satisfaction and pleasure. This devil has achieved his goal. His poison now flows through the veins of his wife and daughter. The funeral was a wonderful day for him. 2 psychologists have identified Laurent as not only a malignant narcissist but also a sociopath. Additionally, I hold Adele partially responsible for the sudden death of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had lung cancer and therefore had difficulty breathing. 3 days before her passing, she had called Adele begging her to finally apologize to my husband and me for the stolen money so that peace could return to the family. Adele verbally attacked her mother so viciously that my other brother-in-law had to intervene. The mother began to hyperventilate so severely due to her daughter's vicious assault that an ambulance had to be called to resuscitate her. 2 days later, she was dead. The next one is an amazing petty revenge story that you don't want to miss. This one is titled, "After 2 years, got paid by a stuck-up daddy's boy." And this one is incredibly satisfying. So, 2 years ago, I drove into a parking lot with my wife and kids, and there seemingly was only one place left, but a BMW was towed in at the front and left almost almost no room. I talked to the attendant and she said that was the last spot. The system handles capacity automatically, so I carefully drove in and parked about 3 centimeters from the other car. I had to get out of mine through the passenger side. When we went to leave, the BMW was gone and 2 of my tires were flat. I called the parking attendant over and showed her, and she called her manager, who said they would send someone within the hour, and my wife and kids took a taxi home and I stayed there waiting. I was pissed and called the police and asked the manager for the video. They would not give me the video without an official police complaint, so I made one, and the manager then had me contact their legal department to take it from there. A few minutes after finishing up all of this, police and legal stuff, the mechanic showed up, filled my tires, and I went home. I had to hound the parking company for almost 3 months until they sent the police a copy of the video 3 times. The first time it was the wrong camera, and the second it was the right camera but wrong time frame. Once the police had the full video, I was able to amend my original complaint to vandalism and directly identify the guy that did it from the camera and license plate. A few more months and I get a letter inviting me to an arbitration. I reply refusing and say that this will be handled through the judicial system. I add this arbitration offer to my complaint. A week later I get a call from Daddy's lawyer offering me a few thousand souls to forget about this, basically saying the kid was mad and made a mistake. I should be reasonable and not let this go too far, but I tell him no to everything and ask not to be contacted again. Well, a few more weeks go by. I think this would be about 6 months after the incident, and I get a court date. 11 months in the future, January of this year, every couple of months I get a call with different offers from different lawyers to drop the case, all of which I make sure to amend to the case documentation. When the court date finally comes, the guys there with Daddy and their lawyer and me with mine, they make one last effort to work out a deal, but I deny it again. The case is over pretty quickly, as the video is horribly damning to this guy's case. You can clearly see him walk up, look at my car, make a few angry gestures, and then pull out his car, get out, and deflate my tires. There wasn't much he could say in his defense. The adjudication goes in my favor and the verdict is common vandalism and is assigned 50 days fine at 50%, which works out to around $1,700 plus 90 days of home arrest. They appealed, but this was thrown out a few weeks ago, and just last week I got the news that the verdict is now final. The payment deadline has been set to October 10th of this year, or else home arrest becomes jail time. They called yesterday asking for my bank account and ended the transfer today, so Monday I'm reporting payment received in the end of this 2-year journey. So Mr. BMW Daddy Boy, I don't know if you use Reddit or not, but enjoy your home arrest, and too bad your university doesn't accept home arrest as a valid excuse, and you will lose all credits this cycle. Maybe think about that next time you wanna screw with someone else's stuff. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit the like and the hype button to support me. Thank you so much.